my favorite number. So 881 presentations. A round of applause before he even gets started. And Bill Green, if you get the Hamilton Spectator or check it out online, Grant really pens compelling, move to action, inspiring op-eds in the newspaper. And he's produced 2 videos featuring young people speaking up about climate change. And he is a lifetime member of the International Save the Pun Foundation. So wait for it. I don't know what's going to be on this presentation. And his dog's name is?
Barkley.
So without further ado, it is my honor to pass the podium over to Grant Linney to inspire us all on how we can all learn from him on how to live more softly on this earth. Grant.
Thanks, Amy. You want to take your phone?
Sure.
So we'll get the puns out of the way right away. Do you know what the difference is between Dubai and Abu Dhabi? The people from Dubai do not like the Flintstones. The people from Abu Dhabi do. So I promise no more of those. That's the title of my presentation. I need to give you some context for the first, about a third of the presentation. So, first a little bit about me. Most of my career I taught outdoors. My last classroom was 450 acres in size. And it was heaven on earth for me to share the natural environment with kids, to have them make the connections, very personal and caring, and for them to start to make the connection to this too. That's our home, and I guess it's my favorite. I have many favorite pictures, but that's probably my favorite. We have encountered a problem, and I do need to provide a context before I get to striving towards net zero. Antonio Guterres is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Last November, at the time of one of the COP conferences of the parties on climate change, he made a series of statements that are rather stark. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It's either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact. These are pretty blunt statements. The deadly impacts of climate change are here and now, and I think this audience is very aware of that. A window of opportunity remains open, but only a narrow shaft of light remains. So we need to get a move on. Last March, just a few months ago, the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it is comprised of scientists, climate scientists from all over the world. They get together periodically, and they don't create the research, they review the existing research. And they had their final synthesis report of the 6th assessment, and you can see the headlines, and you can see that the headlines are pretty dire themselves. Final warnings and brink of catastrophe, and let's get a move on. So we need a name change, and we need it to be more than just words. When you use the word emergency, there's 2 parts to that. Number 1 is action, not words, and number 2 is now, not eventually. And our politicians who have eagerly jumped to adopting the word don't seem to understand those 2 parts, and it's our job to remind them of that. This is a video which I didn't have time to put the sound on. It shows a family getting up, and their house is on fire, and they totally ignore it because they're going through the routines of brushing their teeth, and actually might be able to, the sound you really don't need. It's just this whole bit about our house is on fire, why aren't we reacting? And so here they are, going and waking up son and daughter, and then they go and wash their face and brush their teeth, and breakfast is being made, and lunch is being made. Meanwhile, the house is on fire. And I've always been stunned by this video. And at the end, it says, "Our house is on fire. React." And of course, if our house really was on fire, that sets up the base stem of your brain, the very primitive part. There's adrenaline and there's immediate action. Unfortunately, climate change does not have that immediate peril to it. You notice the parents go back into the house after saying, "Hi kids, have a nice day." We've got to figure out a way to react without the primitive part of our brainstem being instigated by this. So that's Alberta in April, and one of the most impressive scenes of the fire and the impact into the sky. I just found that over the weekend and was quite blown away by it. This is today the fire weather map for Canada, and you'll notice yellow and brown and red are high risk areas. We have a lot of fires going on, and we're still getting smoke alerts. I was at a school one day, and they had announced that in the afternoon there would be the senior girls soccer playoff, and I said, you know, it might get canceled because of the smoke alert. And sure enough, at noon hour, as I was leaving the school, the announcement came on that the game has been canceled due to the smoke. So maybe instead of snow days, we're now going to have smoke days. I need to give you some basics because I just think it's really important to understand that blue line that circumnavigates the globe is the atmosphere. And the atmosphere is critical to life on Earth. It contains naturally occurring greenhouse gases. By far the most common is water vapor. And then there's naturally occurring carbon dioxide, naturally occurring methane, and a few others. They're called greenhouse gases because they perform two functions. Number one, they let the sunlight in. So the sunlight hits water, the sunlight hits land, it gives us the warmth of light. Number two, these same greenhouse gases at night act like a blanket. A lot of heat escapes, but enough of it is kept in that we are 30 degrees Celsius warmer than we would otherwise be. The average surface temperature of the whole globe, not sure how they figure it out, apparently it's not that complicated, but the average surface temperature for the entire globe, pole to pole, including the equator, 365 days a year, is plus 14. If we didn't have this blanket, minus 30, we would be minus 16. We would be a frozen popsicle. So this atmosphere is pretty critical. Now here's the problem. Humans are making the blanket thicker. I love this metaphor because people understand it. If you put a thicker blanket on, you keep in more heat. And that's what we're doing, and we're doing that by burning fossil fuels in all kinds of activities. Whenever you burn coal, oil, gas, or even wood, you release carbon dioxide. That's basic science. It's not up for debate. And that carbon dioxide goes, actually most of it goes into the oceans, but enough of it goes up into the atmosphere to make the blanket thicker. The other big cause, there are other causes, but the other big one is deforestation, which actually happened long before the Industrial Revolution, when we started cutting down trees for agriculture. Trees are natural carbon storage, and when you cut them down, that carbon gets released. So we see the border or boundary between these two countries very clearly because the Dominican Republic has laws to protect its trees. Haiti is so poor, it has no such laws, and people feel compelled to cut down trees for firewood, for cooking. They don't have an alternative. Cut down trees for building materials. They don't have an alternative. And believe it or not, to try and farm this very hilly land, which might work for a couple of years until erosion, both by wind and rain, wash away the good soil. And then they have to move to a new area and cut down more trees. So that's why we have global warming. Okay? And then I want to talk about temperatures. When I show this temperature to students, I say, if tomorrow's 2 degrees warmer than today, would you notice that? And the reaction is normally no. Wouldn't. I ask students if anybody plays sports, and inevitably there's someone, it's mainly high school audiences that I have. And I say, okay, tomorrow, if your internal body temperature is 2 degrees warmer, would you notice that? Yeah. Yeah, it's a fever. It's a small fever, but it's a fever. If you had a soccer practice and you showed up with a 2-degree fever, how would you do? They usually say, not very well. And I say, yeah, you suck. And I immediately say, it's nothing personal. It's just you will tire out very quickly. Your reflexes will be off. The coach will be coming over and saying, what's wrong? We need to understand that 2 degrees is a big deal, especially for a planet whose average surface temperature is plus 14. Now, actually I've lied. The average surface temperature of the globe is now plus 15.2 because of global warming. We have raised that temperature. 2 degrees is what scientists for a long time thought was the safe maximum. We could probably go to 2 and not have catastrophic climate change. What they've done, though, is they've looked at 1.2 and they've looked at the weather records and they've said, okay, we've heated up the planet this much. What has it done to our weather events? And they've poured over the records and they've been shocked. And as a result of what they found, they've said, no, 2 degrees is no longer a safe limit. And that's when they came up a few years ago with 1.5. And we're at 1.2 now. So you can see we're pretty close. What does 1.2 degrees of warming, how does it show up when you look at the records? Well, we've had thermometers since the 1880s. Here's the 21 hottest years on record. You'll notice that none of them go back to the 1800s. Only one goes back to the 1900s, 1998, and all the rest are since the year 2002. That's not an accident. That's a pattern. It's a trend. That's a warning. It's hard empirical evidence that we're heating up the planet. Not only have we raised it an average of 1.2 degrees, these are the 7 years hottest, the last 8 years, and they're in order. So 2020 at this stage is the hottest on record. There's a lot of predictions of that 2023 will be number 1. Okay, in addition to a 1.2 temperature increase, we have what are called heat spikes, where the temperature goes bonkers and goes way up. The all-time heat spike was May 2017 in a little town called Turbat, Pakistan, 55.4 degrees Celsius. Really hard to comprehend that, 55.4. 2 records in 2019. 1 record in 2020. I've also made a particular note of the Australian wildfires, which were major international events, millions of acres destroyed and wildlife and so on. 2021, 3 records there, including the Canadian heat record in Linney, BC, which you probably remember burst into flame and was totally wiped out. July of 2021, at this point, is the hottest month ever recorded. 2022 wasn't bad in Burlington and Hamilton. On the other side of the world, Europe and China, they had the hottest temperatures ever recorded. This is today, New York Times, looking at the American South. And the dark red is, they call it danger. What's the range there? 103 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And the days vary. Houston is going up to 111 degrees Fahrenheit this week. Jacksonville, Florida, 106 today. New Orleans, 111 today, and 115 on Thursday. Similarly with Atlanta and a number of other cities down there. So extreme heat. And this is going to become more common. It's going to last longer and it's going to be more frequent. This is a bar graph from the University of Western Ontario in London. And it looks at the number of hot days in a year. It defines a hot day as a day with a temperature above 30 degrees Celsius, not 40 or 50. We Canadians are somewhat spoiled at this stage. London, this is London, Ontario, or Western is, not London, New England. You'll notice there's 4 colors, blue, yellow, orange, and red, and they correspond to 4 different periods of time. Blue is in the past, 1961 to 1990. The average number of days over 30 degrees Celsius was 8. I remember that growing up. It was maybe about a week. Okay. 2020 to 2040 is no longer projected. It's already happened. It happened in the year 2020. So as of that year, London got to 22 days above 30 degrees Celsius. That's practically a 3-fold increase. That's a huge jump. Mid-century, they're saying 37. By as early as 2080, they're saying 68 days average per year over 30 degrees Celsius. 68. That would be all of July, all of August, spill over into June and or September. When you have this disruption in heat, you get the heat waves, and you also get all these things. You get too much water, that's the first row, and the second row, heat, dry, wind, fire. And we've always had these events, but they're more frequent, they last longer, they're more intense. This is a rain bomb in Tucson, Arizona. Here it comes, look. Warmer air holds more moisture. And for some reason, the clouds hold that water until they're so heavy, they don't, like you see here. And this actually happened, I don't know whether anybody was, yeah, I see some heads nodding. August the 4th, 2014, just Burlington, not Oakville, not Hamilton, and I believe it was just south of the Queen Elizabeth Way. The Queen Elizabeth Way was closed, and a lot of basements were flooded out. So localized cloud, done. This will become more common. I'm going to do this flow chart really quickly. I basically, here's the 2 main problems. There are other contributors like agriculture, but these are the 2 main ones. And I'm going to end up filling this page because we're the ones burning fossil fuels and cutting down trees. We are causing global warming. That's what anthropogenic means, human cause. So we've got heat, we've got melt. Melt is the loss of land ice, particularly Greenland and Antarctica, probably Baffin Island too. Greenland is about 1/10 the size of Antarctica, but if Greenland melted completely, all by itself, worldwide sea levels would go up 7 meters from Greenland alone. So this is a big deal. The United Nations figures out that for every 1 meter of sea level increase, there will be more than 100 million refugees who will have to leave seaside villages, towns, and cities. So big impact. The Arctic, a lot of the Arctic is sea ice because it's already floating in the water. When it melts, it doesn't cause sea level rise. However, the loss of ice, whether it's in the Arctic or the Antarctic, disrupts the refrigeration system of the planet. And when it disrupts that cooling system, it causes extreme weather events in other parts of the world. So the drought in California can be connected to the loss of ice in the Arctic. And I remember when I first heard that, my brain kind of went, what? It's all connected. And when you disrupt one part of the system, you end up disrupting others. So this is getting into what are called feedback loops. I'm not going to take the time to get into them right now. Permafrost, permanently frozen ground like Siberia, is vast permafrost. Well, with global warming, that permafrost is starting to thaw. And it stores a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases locked into the ground because it's thawing out. Those gases are being released. They're going up into the atmosphere. They're making the blanket thicker, so they're generating more heat. And that's what's called a positive feedback loop. More heat, more melt. You're going to get rid of those black arrows. Glaciers all over the world are disappearing. That's a big deal for both human and our crop water supplies. Huge deal. Extreme heat, Spread of disease. When I talk to high school students, I say, when you were born, there was no such thing as West Nile virus or Lyme disease in Burlington. They have shown up in the last 15 years because our winters are milder and the bugs that carry those diseases can't survive. Warmest 20 years, I think it should be 21 years on record now, actually. Crops are certainly affected by heat. The oceans, two things are happening to the oceans. Number one, they're warming up, obviously slower than air, but they are warming up, and that's putting stress on the marine life. Number two, remember I mentioned most of the carbon dioxide actually goes into the oceans. It reacts with salt water to form carbonic acid. We are acidifying the oceans. We're killing the coral reefs. They're bleaching because of that acidification. It impacts mollusks, animals with shells. The shells are being weakened. It jeopardizes fisheries. The last one, humans. You might think we're just observers of all this, but no, all those red circles are human impacts. They will affect us. Too much water, too little water, crop failure, spread of disease. All those red circles, all those human impacts are because of the burning of fossil fuels and the cutting down of trees. We have nailed the problem, and so Captain Obvious and the rest of us should know what the answer is. Okay? We've got to keep fossil fuels in the ground. Okay? And not be lured away by the myth of carbon capture, which is very expensive and unproven. And it's just going to take too long. We need to keep these in the ground. We need to keep a lot more trees.
I'm really scared. I'm very sad.
Je suis vraiment fâché.
This is a climate emergency. Our best scientists are warning that we only have until 2030 to keep global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Même un demi-degré au-dessus de cela pourrait entraîner des chaleurs extrêmes, de la sécheresse, des inondations et de la pauvreté pour des millions de personnes.
Ceci est un message pour tous les adultes canadiens.
From us, your kids, we need you to panic.
On a besoin que vous agissiez.
Change laws, not light bulbs.
Demand that our politicians and other leaders fight climate change massively and immediately.
Stop burning fossil fuels.
We have the right to a stable climate.
Il y a déjà tellement de solutions qui existent.
Future generations depend on what you do now.
You.
So those are Hamilton High School students. And I got them together with a film crew, and we produced that video. This is really important to understand. Once you understand that science, which is the best way we have of understanding the world around us, once science presents us with a problem, we then have to turn to politics. They're connected. And I say to grade 10 students, they're the main group because of the climate change unit that they have in their science class. I say, you have a unit called civics, a subject called civics, and you have a subject called science. For this point of studying them, it's good that they're separate. In the real world, they go together. When science presents you with a problem, you then have to turn to the political arena. And that doesn't mean a particular party, but what it does mean is that we have to speak up and demand that our politicians act based on our own awareness. Yes?
Also, how do you address the arguments made by many politicians and arguments made by, let's say, fossil fuel industry lobbyists that fossil fuels are important for the economy and stuff? And
They have been. We certainly have.
And how do we make sure we can actually respond to it?
Well, we've got to stop. I mean, that's what I'm trying to show you by the stats and the figures. That we've got to stop burning fossil fuels, and we've got to. I am stunned that the climate conferences allow fossil fuel executives to show up there. They shouldn't be there. They simply should not be there. The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. We've got to step up. Okay, we've got to find our ways to do it. I love this picture, and I think there's a lot of truth in it. That was downtown Hamilton, a youth protest. I love this book for 3 reasons. Number one, it's an excellent summary of climate change. Very, very well written, not that long. Number two, Christiana Figueres, the lead author, is an incredibly poised, articulate, capable woman who was the chief negotiator at the Paris Climate Summit. We need more women like her in leadership. We need more women to get us out of this mess. The title, I love too. The future we choose. When we go home and our house is powered by natural gas, the heating system, or we get in a car that has an internal combustion, and I mean these are natural things for us to have, but we are choosing a future that is not ideal. We need to make other choices. So I'm going to get to the positive stuff now. I needed to give you that context to start with. And this is what I'm going to go through. Number one, if you want to go towards net zero, there is a federal Greener Homes grant, and there's also a loan. And A+ to the government for this. There's a lot of things they're failing on, but this is really good. One of the requirements for the Greener Homes grant is that you contract EnerGuide, and they come and do an assessment of your home before you do the changes and after, which is really cool because you can see the change. One of the first things you should do, don't jump and get solar panels, you need to seal your envelope. So that means looking at your attic, your basement, your windows, and your doors. Where is the warm air leaking in the winter? Where is the cool air leaking in the summer? Then you need to upgrade your heating and cooling, and I'll talk about that. You need to upgrade your water heater, and you might consider installing solar panels. And the last thing I had, this is on Amy's email, and I saw it today, and I thought, yeah, Greta's one of my favorites, and I love this. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. Well, I'm going to give you a series of actions that you can potentially take, and hopefully that's going to engender hope in you, and it will empower you to step beyond and realize we don't just need to do things as individuals. We've got to get the government to support us through a federal Greener Homes grant and to take more leadership on this. So the Greener Homes grant, there's outright rebates of up to $10,000 plus $800 for the mandatory EnerGuide assessment. You can simply Google Canada Greener Homes grant and you'll find it. There's also a 10-year interest-free loan of up to $40,000. That's very substantial. And since it's 10 years, you're going to have time. For example, if you do solar panels, the money saved with the solar can go towards repaying that interest-free loan. So A+ for that, for sure. And I guess I've got a 1-800 number there too. So we've got the first two bullets are federal grants. The third bullet is municipal funding, and I'm not sure where Burlington is at with this.
Launched it.
Sorry?
Burlington just launched it.
Okay, great. And Hamilton's just launched it too. They are providing some limited support for people to go green. These are good steps. It means all three governments. Our Ontario government is AWOL on this, and noticeably AWOL. Sometimes people ask me, well, what if I'm going to sell the house? You have to repay it to do that. Yeah, zero in Ontario for provincial, municipal. Hamilton has this HERO program, and it has a new Office of Climate Change Initiatives that's headed up by an extremely capable person who's the executive director of Environment Hamilton, Cassie. You need to consider your needs at the moment. Like if you're, your furnace is on its last legs, well, then that's an ideal time to look at a heat pump. The EnerGuide test involves a series of things, including this. This is called a blower door test. They open the inside door, they seal over the outside, put a big fan on that blows air out, and they have sensors that are able to measure where air and how much air comes in. So how leaky is the envelope? This is the rating of my home before I had the improvements made. It was 85. Now, 85 out of 100 sounds good, but actually what you want is 0. net zero. So I'm 85. I'm at that. I have a 1940s home. The average for a typical new home is now 65. Okay, so I was above that. So they came up with a series of recommendations. The interesting thing here is that we moved into the house in December 2008. I did an inner guide assessment then, and I have an inner guide assessment from 2022. Things have really changed. The heating system, at that time they said, replace it with an Interstar qualified gas furnace, high efficiency. They don't say that anymore. It's now heat pumps. Okay, central air conditioner. Well, the heat pump does dual duty. It does both. The domestic hot water system, instantaneous gas water heater. No, they're now saying heat pump water heaters. Insulation and windows and doors, yes, for sure. So one of the recommendations I had was to insulate my foundation, increase the insulation value, and they gave various details about why. I had a foam insulation installed that was blown right onto the wall. Didn't go all the way down because in 2008 it was not necessary to go all the way down. They're now saying all the way down. Great Northern Insulation, who's the company that installed this, said, we think it's a bit overkill. You don't need to go all the way down. Ask more than one expert. I think that's a really good point. Upgrade windows, Energy Star certified models. That makes sense. That's pretty straightforward. So this is a basement window with double pane, and it's got Interstar rating. This is another. This almost looks like a picture frame. It's a sealed window, whereas the previous one was one I could open to let in fresh air. These are windows upstairs. I have leaded glass as part of the features of this 1940s home. I didn't want to lose that, so I put insulated glass outside. And then air sealing. Now what was that air sealing referred to? We've already talked about insulation. Doors, weather stripping, any place that leaks were identified. This is the attic, and that's a lot of insulation going in. I think that is showing, is that 18 or 16? It's like 18 inches. It's a lot of insulation, and it makes a difference. Couldn't really do the side of the walls. That would have been very expensive to do that, but I was able to do the basement and do the attic. Heat pumps. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the International Energy Agency are now really promoting heat pumps. Heat pumps don't generate heat, they transfer heat. And I can't really explain the technology of it, but they are able in the wintertime to find warm air outside and frigid cold air and bring it in, and in the summertime do the opposite. Find cool air on a hot day and bring it in. They're very efficient in doing it, and they're as you can see, they really have a positive effect. That's the exterior fans for my heat pump, and very efficient, not that noisy. Inside, it's almost like I have a furnace. It's a different layout, but there's an air exchanger and other support technology to get the
ground
ventilation
source
through the
heat
house.
pumps are considered at all.
Ground source heat pumps are considered. That's another.
It's just you haven't mentioned
Coming. You're ahead of me.
it. Okay.
So, based on my own recommendations, I would say go with a recognized manufacturer for your heat pump. So Mitsubishi is a big name, and go with a heating and cooling contractor who is reputable and understands that there are cold air source heat pumps now. Some of them will say, oh, you need a gas furnace with your heat pump. No, you do not. No more. The heat pump will do it. Okay? So if you get a contractor who's trying to sell you a furnace, you need to find someone else. This is a little description about how they work. I'm not going to get into the physics of it. And there are other types of heat pumps, as you asked about. So geothermal is certainly an option. And it was one that was offered to me when we first moved into the house. I kind of chickened out. I didn't know enough about it. Didn't go for it. They do save money over time. So over a 15-year period, you're actually going to have lower costs with an air source heat pump and a heat pump water heater. You notice the initial costs, yes, they're more expensive, but then over time, you do save money. There is an online calculator. The Clean Air Alliance of Ontario, really worthwhile website to go to. They have lots of really worthwhile information. So you need to look at again, do a diagnostic of your house and what you need. And this slide comes from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. They've got a lot of really good resources on their website. Electric panels, there's a good chance that if you don't have 200 amp service that you will need to upgrade to that, especially if you're going to have an EV charger for your car. So I did upgrade the hot water system, and again, this is a heat pump water heater, apparently much more efficient than the gas water heaters that were recommended in 2008. And then the renewable energy system, I would say this is one of the last things you do. You deal with your house first, and then if you've got space and you're not shaded out and you've got an ideal aspect for solar, then you put those on. And the difference between these two pictures, these ones have critter guards on them. So in this one, when they were first installed, the squirrels could get underneath and chew the wires. And the installer recommended the critter guards, so did that. This is on the outside of my house, and there's some stats there that I really can't explain them to you. I've got a fairly good setup. This is the meter, and this is a two-direction meter. So you'll notice there's an arrow going to the right, that's when I'm consuming energy. The arrow going to the left is when I'm producing energy. And I've got a little clip here. Look, I'm producing. Look at how it's going in reverse. I love it. And I was thrilled to bits when they told me, if you're producing energy and you plug in your car during the day, you're getting your energy from your solar panels. And it's like, yes! And run your washing machine, and run your dryer and dishwasher during the day on a sunny day. And the same reason. So this is what Amy was referring to. This was my post-report card. And I was over the moon. I got to net zero. For a 1940s home. I couldn't believe it. There's another shoe. Neither could my solar installer. He said, the guy's got your numbers wrong. And I said, look, I need you to talk to him and get it straight. So I got a revised report card. And my revised report card is 39. Now I was 85, so I've cut that in more than half. And I'm in the green, I'm below the average, and it's a 1940s home. For me to do more, there would be pretty extensive renovation, and I don't think it's worth it. I would have loved to have zero, but this is good. The modern homes can actually be net positive. They can produce more energy than they consume. Indoors, I have an induction stove. And this has all the benefits of natural gas without the fumes, without the childhood asthma-producing fumes and other dangers of natural gas. And I also have an electric barbecue made by Weber, who's a major barbecue manufacturer, and they now have an electric. So that's pretty. It's slower than gas, but it works, and it tastes just as good. So there's the 5 steps that I followed, and then I'm going to add a few at the end here which are beyond your own home, looking at your personal transportation and wherever possible, can you bike, can you use public transit, can you ride share, would you consider an electric vehicle? Vacation, really, really high carbon footprint. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Diet, eating local where possible, and reducing meat and dairy, certainly makes a difference. That's my electric vehicle. That's an Ioniq 5, and I love it. Electric cars have torque. When you're at a red light, and I must confess I love this, there's a car beside me, and I don't speed. But when the light turns green, I accelerate briskly. And the car beside me, I look in the rearview mirror, and it's just a little thing that, wow.
It's not as much fun as it used to be a couple years ago.
I'm sorry?
When we first got the Tesla a few years ago, like nobody had electric vehicles at that point, so
Yeah.
like you'd smoke every car, like Mustangs, all of them.
Yeah.
And it was embarrassing them.
Yeah.
Till Robert,
They're
they-
going, what the?
Yeah, exactly. Now they don't even try because they know they don't stand a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, for the longest
It's
time,
pretty
quite
cool.
entertaining.
They're fun to drive, and they're very, very efficient. The world's first all-electric airline is Harbour Air in Canada. Now, it's a small airline. It's seaplanes, electric seaplanes that go from Vancouver Harbour to at least 3 destinations on Vancouver Island, Victoria Harbour, Nanaimo, and Campbell. Okay? All electric, world's first. Small, but world's first, Canadian. This is exciting. Airbus, it has 3 prototypes for hydrogen-fueled, emissions-free aircraft. The bad news is they're saying these won't be commercially available until 2035. This is where I think the government needs to step in and oblige the various aircraft manufacturers to work together and provide support. This needs to happen sooner. I love to fly and see other parts of the world, but I'm not falling for frequent flyer anymore. I would call myself an infrequent flyer. The last time I flew was 2019. Yeah, I'll probably get on the plane again, but and be very, very sparing about it because it really does have a high carbon footprint. Things can change quickly. So I just want to give you an example. 1980, the cell phone first appeared. AT&T goes, what's this? They commission a study and they say, okay, how many users will there be by the year 2000? That was the projection. Too high, too low. Too low.
What does that mean in Canada?
109 million, 120 times larger. And guess what it is now?
At a 0.
Sorry, at a 0? Oh, it didn't show it. Wow, I don't know what happened there. There are now more cell phones than there are people. I think it's 10.4 billion.
So add 2 more zeros.
So, yeah. Yeah. So, this is something Al Gore said when I was trained by him. He doesn't use it anymore, and I'm really sad that he doesn't. I think it's so true that it's more important to change laws than light bulbs. Let's use light bulbs as an example. I've changed all my light bulbs to LED. Good for me. I'm not going to save the planet by doing that. If the government steps in and says, okay, fluorescent bulbs, and I believe they've done this, are going to become obsolete within X time. Do the same with incandescent bulbs. Let's have them. Why not fluorescent? Why not quartz halogen? Let's only have LED as an option. That's system change. And that's what we need. And we need to urge our government to do more legislation along that line. I want to show you Canada's embarrassing report card. Okay? This is our emissions between the year 2000 and 2018. We were well aware of climate change in the year 2000. You'll notice we didn't go down. We're just as high in 2018 as we were in the year 2000. There was a little dip with COVID. We've gone back. Okay? Great big fat F. Okay? And this is a comparison of us to the other G7 countries. And again, we stick out like a sore thumb. This one goes back to 1990. So it shows pretty well everybody going up in the 90s. Canada went up, had a dip, and they're still 21% over their 1990 figure. Contrast to the United Kingdom, 42% below its 1990 figure. And even the United States has gone back down to 1990 figures. Yes, we are a fossil fuel producer, but this is embarrassing, and we've got to find other ways to have a viable economy. We're killing the planet. Another embarrassing. All of these promises have been broken, and you'll notice I've even put an F for the 2030 promises, and this is based on experts saying at the rate we're going, we're not going to make those commitments. So we really have a terrible record. Sometimes people ask me, if you've done 880 of these presentations, don't you get depressed? I did go through a phase of that, and then I realized this. When you get sad and down, you're just sloppy and mopey, and you don't feel like doing anything. Mad motivates. Grr! I want to do something. So better mad than sad. These are my election signs. They're about an issue, not a party. They were up for the municipal, the federal, the provincial election. They're still up. Okay. Seth Klein, this is an interesting book. He has looked at World War II, and he has said, you know what? Canada punched way, way, way above its weight in World War II. We did an outsized contribution, not only in terms of sending lots of soldiers over, but also our manufacturing industry was totally re-geared. We produced tons of ammunition, tanks, army trucks. We had the 4th largest Air Force in the world, and I believe the 4th largest Navy in the world by the end of World War II. We went to town. And he's saying that's the kind of effort we need in fighting climate change. And if you read the book, I'm not going to go through all of those, but he talks about transforming government, setting up a climate emergency war cabinet, and a climate emergency secretariat right in the Prime Minister's office. That's the kind of prioritizing. Very interesting book. Again, I would recommend you go to this website. They have these are 3 of their booklets. So they've got ones on air source and ground source heat pumps, so they can tell you about both of them and address the issue of gas heated homes. So you can just Google Clean Air Alliance, you'll find it. This is a wonderful book, and you don't need to buy it. Go to the website. The website is more current than the book. This lists between 80 and 100 different ways of reducing carbon in the atmosphere. And it's scientists that have drawn up this list. They detail them. They not only detail them, they rank them. So the number 1 most effective, and I was surprised, wind is ahead of solar. Okay. That surprised me. 3, 4, and 5 really surprised me. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to talk about them. Number 3 is reduced food waste. The 3rd most effective way. And when you think about food waste, it starts on the farmer's field when some of the crop that's cut is not actually picked up and harvested. It happens in the food distribution center. It happens in the grocery store when the manager's putting food out and goes, oh, bruised apple, throws it out. Okay? And then it happens, especially with what I would call male fridge blindness. Honey, there's a salad in the fridge, don't forget to eat it. And honey forgets, and then it goes into compost. So guys are particularly prone to doing that, I believe. Number 4, plant-rich diets. I was raised on meat. I still enjoy a good steak every now and then, but I have cut down on my meat quite a bit. So I am eating more plant-based. Number 5 is interesting. health and education of women and girls in certain third world countries where women and girls are not regarded as full-fledged citizens. Afghanistan, the Taliban. You don't need to go to school. Your purpose is to produce children and look after them. You don't need an education. Well, if women and girls have education and access to health, they will choose not to have as many children. And population is certainly part of this issue. This is another book, Paul Hoffman, who did Drawdown, and this is another very good book about, and that's what we need to do. We need to end the climate crisis in one generation. My last set of slides, and Amy was talking about one of the big mandates of BurlingtonGreen, nature, spending time inside. I find it very sad that we now have a national annual Take Me Outside Day. That's a really sad reflection on where we're at. Outdoor experience is becoming extinct. Now, I really admire the person who has started this and does this at the same time it's sad. That speaks for itself. There is no Wi-Fi in the forest, but I promise you will find a better connection. Tell that to high school kids when you are taking them on a canoe trip and you say no cell phones. What? They're outraged. This is rather amazing, and I don't have it as a video, but this guy was so busy texting, he did not notice the whale. He did not look up. Yeah, and that's a real commentary. And I think I'm going right near the end. There's my favorite image again, and there's my title slide, striving for net zero. So I'm not saying achieving net zero, but doing the best you can. And that's so important to make your voice heard. If you decide to take these steps at your home, you need to talk your walk as well as walking your talk. So if somebody asks me about my car, I said, do you want to take it for a drive? I'll sit in the passenger seat. I want you to feel what an electric car is like. You want to know about my panels? I'll tell you about them. And I'll give you the name of the person who installed them. Okay? So spread the word. This is not stuff that should be kept as a state secret. Okay? And that's my last slide. Thank you. So are there any questions? Yes, sir.
So how exactly should we address certain arguments such as, oh, fossil fuels are necessary for the economy. Oh, the economy is so so reliant on fossil fuels. How are we ever going to change? And how do we even begin to address those arguments?
You can't have a healthy economy without a healthy ecology. That's square one. And in Canada, yeah, we're particularly challenged because we are a fossil fuel producer. And we have economically benefited from that in the past.
Yeah.
We need to get off our shortcuts and reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, and
become
also,
a leader in green energy.
And also rich people who's motivated more by the money coming from fossil fuels.
Yes.
Rather than, well, doing stuff that's good for everyone.
Yeah, I agree.
And how do you even change their minds?
We need to make our voice heard. We need to drown them out. And we need to challenge the government as to why fossil fuel lobbyists are allowed to show up at COP conferences.
And then they
climate
make
change
arguments such as, if we ban all the fossil fuels now, millions of people are going to starve.
There needs to be a transition, but it needs to happen faster than what we're doing right now. There was another hand. Yes?
I was just going to say, I really liked your thing on the switching over, and we have at my townhouse, we are about to, we've had our energy audit, so we've completed stage 1.
Fantastic.
Painless. our heat pump arrives tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then we'll get the follow-up, and it has been wonderful. And we did it just through our company that did our heating and cooling. So-
Well, you have a unique audience of fellow townhouse owners, and
Yes.
letting them know, look, this is possible on your scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
so,
great. Good for you.
Hopefully, if you're BurlingtonGreen, I'll keep everyone posted.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
It's been an easy journey so far.
Good. Good. Yes, sir.
A lot of people tend to quote and like the idea of hydrogen as an alternative fuel source as opposed to fossil fuels. What are your thoughts in regards to the majority of hydrogen currently produced is offset based on natural gas production?
I don't know enough to answer that. I know that there are, in Europe, there is a hydrogen power plant. So they're using it to power instead of natural gas. Now, what its association is with gas, I don't understand that, so I can't really comment on that. It's the same with electric cars. There's downsides. The lithium-ion batteries are not exactly environmentally friendly. They're hoping in another 5 years that the batteries are going to change quite radically.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of potential change there, and we also have companies like Redwood Materials down in California and Oregon, and then there's like popping up in Quebec that are looking at recycling those products as well. So that's definitely unconventional as it is right now. Majority of the hydrogen production, it's not really something that's profitable to produce in a green way. So a lot of the hydrogen production we currently have is what comes as an offset as a side effect from natural gas mining production.
The prediction that I saw was that by 2030, that would change, that they would have better technology and that it would be green. They're talking about green hydrogen for the Hamilton steel mills.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is ArcelorMittal has a plant in Europe that is on green hydrogen. They're not planning to do it in Hamilton, and I don't know why. And I don't know what the government's response is. Hey, why aren't you doing this? There's a lot of fronts to fight this on. I think it's the good thing about doing some stuff in your own backyard is you feel like you're doing something, and it gives you that basis for hope, and it gives you the basis to move up to the next level and say, okay, come on, government, why aren't you doing more? And it's really, really, really too bad that the opposition party, the major opposition party federally, is saying if we're elected, we're going to ban the gas tax, we're going to get rid of it, the carbon tax. That's a terrible disservice to Canadians, and it's feeding into people going, oh, get rid of the tax, good. Whereas the vast majority of economists say, it works. We shouldn't be in that debate. We should be moving on. So, and I don't mean to get partisan, but it's just the wrong decision. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you were giving your speeches to people like Roger in a group. Like here, you give us some ideas. You're also preaching to convert.
Yes, you're right.
You're
right.
You ever go anywhere say your speeches to people who are completely opposite views? Do you have any?
I had a public town hall in Port Hope, and I had some feisty people who spoke up, and it was quite interesting because at first it was, oh, your figures are all skewed. You're just doing this for your argument. But then I actually sat down with this person and talked. There was some sane conversation, and she actually had some good ideas, and I really encouraged her to speak up and participate.
Do you think it'd be better if there was more of those meetings that you attended?
They're a little bit stressful, but I don't know what. You're right. You're right. Speaking to the converted is I can justify speaking to the converted if I motivate you to do something and to spread the word the best way you can.
Kind of like the car that you say you have. You like to get it like you
Hyundai Ioniq 5.
Hyundai.
Yeah.
What do you think about the hybrids? They're
Well, there's new technology in hybrids where some of the hybrids actually, and I can't give you the proper terminology, but they actually get green vehicle designation because they're so incredibly efficient in their use of gasoline. Not a typical internal combustion engine at all. And I've forgotten what the term is for those, but Toyota, one of their Priuses has that green vehicle designation.
Yeah, I find that with hybrid, like Stellantis is now putting manufactured hybrids and electric vehicles in plants in Windsor and Thompson.
Yeah.
They're plowing into it $3.5 billion into those plants.
Yes.
The government has also pledged another $1 billion to that plant. I just get a feeling that sometimes the gas companies are dragging their feet on the manufacturers. I think hybrid funding, although I understand the advantages of that, and I think they're okay idea, but I think and they're more efficient. Like most of the hybrids, the manufacturers made them to travel about 50 kilometers on the electric side, and the rest is on the gasoline side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different models. I mean, there's so many plug-in, so many doing.
So there's actually two hybrid technologies, series and parallel. If you look at Chevy Volt, it's a series. So essentially you've got a generator, charges the battery, and the battery runs the engines, or runs motors to do.
Yeah, there's a few different plants.
Most of the DME today, especially SUVs, all of them are all parallel. So you've got a drivetrain system that's gas as well as electric supporting it. They like that because then there's some maintenance, and that's the big issue with a lot of manufacturers, because maintenance, they lose big dollars. If you look at Tesla, first scheduled service line coming here for your brakes, it's crazy. Whereas gas, you're in every 8K or 6K to get that oil changed and keep that garage operating, which is all right now.
That leads to another question: is it just as expensive to maintain the service electric vehicles?
Not even, but I've got two of them, okay? I've got a Tesla, I've got a Mitsubishi hybrid. Mitsubishi hybrid needs oil change every 6 or every 8K, yet in that 8K, that engine might run because of what I do with it.
So you're saying the Tesla is cheaper?
You can't even compare them.
So you still have to do certain things.
You have to do certain
So
things.
suspension work, brakes work.
Hey folks, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but maybe you two can have a chat. Only because the library's gonna come in and with the keys and tell us leave. And I don't want anybody to leave without a round of applause again for climate. Obviously you've done way more, 881 presentations than your fair share of any one person should have to do, but it is a reflection of your commitment and your conviction, as well as everything that you're doing for Student Grant. And as a small way of thanking you again, I know the best thing we can do is not give you a gift, although you can let me know if you need a gift, but it's actually planting new life on this earth. So next April, we're going to be planting a tree in honor of you and the sharing that you did this evening. So thank you again. On your way out, grab a piece of cake. You heard Grant talk about food waste. We're not with any food waste. So grab, join our newsletter. Thank you so much for participating in our annual general meeting, and we really hope you'll get involved with Burlington Green throughout 2023. Thank you so much for attending.